I think the worst thing you can do in anything, but especially in the news business, is pigeonhole yourself into that little pocket. I'm only a reporter, or I'm, only sports, or I'm only news, or, because there's so many options and opportunities, and they all allow you to grow in a different way.
Welcome to the Next Level Journalist, where you will hear from some of the best journalists in the business, or who have been there, done that, and willing to share with you what they've learned so you can get better, faster. My guest today is someone I worked with at KOSA TV in Midland, Odessa, Texas. I was the weekend sports anchor at the time. She was a news reporter, anchor, and even though she's no longer in the TV industry today, she still has more than a decade of experience and knowledge that I know that you will benefit from today. So Stephanie Rivas, thank you so much for making time for this today.
Thank you for having me. This is fun.
Yeah, no doubt. What I tell people all the time, it's selfishly a way of me connecting with old friends and faces, but at the same time, I know that, people who have been there and done that can benefit so many others and avoid the mistakes that we made along
Absolutely.
the way. At least that's the purpose or the idea behind all this.
Yeah, to be able to give some information, or to be able to share a lesson with someone that is just starting out. It was a long time ago for me, but I still remember what that feeling was like, starting out in the business, and there's so much unknown, and you're really trying to navigate, so many different things. And so I think what you're doing is great. It offers an opportunity for, like you said, someone who's just stepping into those shoes to be able to learn some really hard taught lessons along the way.
Well, let's do that. Let's go down memory lane for you a little bit and take us back to when you knew that, TV was something that you wanted to pursue, and what it was like going after your that first job. But take us back to when you first got interested, and, how you broke through, when you broke through, and where your career has taken you up to date. Now, obviously it's a Cliff Notes version, but just paint a picture for us of what that's been like for you.
Well, I think I was always the student that loved words and loved to write. At the core of who you are, there's always that little something. I didn't grow up wanting to be a news reporter or news anchor that I knew in the front of my head. When I started in college, I was one of those students that I thought I was going to be a teacher for a while, and then, kind of went down some different roads. I really loved performance. I loved live theater. I loved music. And so my first track was to be a theater education major. And it was literally at the point of just about to graduate that I decided that teaching was not going to be for me. I didn't want to be a teacher full time. What did that mean with a theater degree? Well, I was at least realistic enough to understand that I wasn't going to go be a starving artist in LA or, anything like that. So I connected with a mentor in college who was over the broadcast and mass communications department. And I sat and just had a real conversation with her. And that led me into changing my degree plan and staying a little bit longer. But my degree was in mass communications with an emphasis in broadcasting. And so I worked at the college radio station and took some television broadcasting classes. And that's when I fell in love with the medium, television itself, and the way that you could tell a story with, with picture and with sound and all of those great things. It really clicked the creative part of my brain, if you will. And, but even then, my first job in this market, because I started in the Midland, Odessa market in 97. And I started as a television producer. So I came in on the writing side more than anything, and worked as a producer for the morning show, then for the 10 p.m. newscast. And then it was only after doing that I transitioned into an anchor and a reporter in the field. But being a producer, I always felt like really taught me to look at the big picture of a newscast. So it wasn't just about me and my story. I understood that my story fit into a much larger product. And so I really liked the fact that I started as a producer and that I was able to then work my way up. I also understood what the producer wanted from my story at that point, right? Because as a producer, I had a very clear vision of what I wanted that story to look like within that newscast. And so then as a reporter, I was then able to develop those stories the way I knew they would fit best within that newscast.
Right.
So, so that was all, really great. Now, I worked in this market. I worked in this market from 97 to 2005. And then I moved to San Antonio, and I worked in the San Antonio market for a few years. And I worked for the Fox affiliate there as a reporter and a fill-in anchor. And then I moved back to the Midland, Odessa area. And that's when I worked with you at CBS 7 as an anchor and reporter. And the last 9 years of my life, I have spent in this building. So this is the Wagner Noel Performing Arts Center. It is a spectacular building in between Midland and Odessa. It's owned by the University of Texas Permian Basin. I work for a management company called ASM Global. So we are a management company of venues. And I started in this building as the director of marketing. And now 9 years later, I'm the general manager of this building. So I run this facility. I'm here now. So it's definitely been a journey, but I think everything that we do in life, all my experience as a reporter, as an anchor, as a producer, all played into even what I do now in this role.
I love that, and that you mentioned how those skills are transferable to what you do today. And wow, people that get into this and firsthand just how once you get in and do something like TV news, it's almost like you can do anything.
Yes.
Outside of math numbers, I was never good at math. So
exactly, no math.
There's a reason I got into in TV in the first place. What do you credit your success to? I mean, you look at what you've been able to do, and you clearly could have stayed in something like TV. When you share with people that you went from somewhere like Midland to San Antonio, it's a huge jump. And then today you are running, a massive operation there in West Texas. What do you credit your success to? Whether that be, some of the intangible stuff or the tangible stuff, what comes to mind when you think about what you can credit, what's taken you from A to B, where you're at today?
I think it's a little bit of what you're doing today. It's learning along the way. It's literally consuming information and then transferring that information. So, for instance, making that jump from Midland to San Antonio, like you said, for an anchor reporter, that's a big deal. When we moved to San Antonio, we actually moved because my husband was being transferred at the time. So it wasn't even for for me personally. But I knew that obviously that was a market I wanted to work in. Mm-hmm. When I moved to San Antonio for the first year that we were there, I actually worked in communications. Again, those skills being transferable. I didn't feel at that time, I was very scared of doing anything outside of television. I knew TV so well. I knew that world so well, I felt like. But I had an opportunity. I had a friend who was working with the Girl Scouts in San Antonio at their office. And she said, I need a PR and communications director. I would really like for you to come do that. And I even said to her, I don't know if I can do that. And she said, you know exactly the message we want to get out because you were on the other side delivering that message. She said, it's just the opposite side. And that was great. It made it, again, forced me to think in a little bit of a different way. But I thought, you're right. I read press releases and wrote off of press releases for 10 years. Yeah. So now I'm just writing them. Now I know exactly what I want you to say on the other side. So I did that for a year. But then, of course, as you know, the news bug is hard to break. And so I kept applying and waiting for that opportunity. And I got that opportunity with the Fox affiliate. And went in to do that. But, really along the way, I will say taking everything you can, whether it's, from another individual in another discipline or your news director, I learned lots of great lessons from, my news directors, just, listening to them and how they had to view the operation again differently. I think the worst thing you can do in anything, but especially in the news business, is pigeonhole yourself into that little pocket. I'm only a reporter, or I'm, only sports, or I'm only news, or, because there's so many options and opportunities, and they all allow you to grow in a different way. And so I say that, I'm where I'm at today because I've listened to other people. I've watched and learned. I have made mistakes along the way, no doubt, right? I mean, we all make mistakes, but the best thing that we can do is just go, okay, what did I learn from that? Not going to do that again. Now I know the right way to do something. And just listen to yourself, listen to, what your heart and your head are telling you. I loved news. I really did. I, spent almost 15 years in news. But then there was this time that this building called my heart. Again, my first love was live performance, theater. And so when this, again, I've been here 9 years. 9 years ago, I would not have said, I'm going to be running this building. No way, no how, right? I mean, that was just not how it was going to be. I started as the director of marketing because, again, I went back to that place where I'm like, oh, I know this market. I know television here. I know radio here. I want to tell the story of this facility. That's what I wanted to do. And so that's what I started here doing. But along the way, we had GMs that, didn't want to stay in the market. And so and just, again, instinctively, I think in news, we have a little bit of a leadership thing. We just kind of jump in and get it done, right? There's no second thought. It's just, there's something I have to do. And so, we'd have a GM that would cycle off, and I was your go-to girl. I'd step in. What do we need to do? Let's keep this place going. So, again, learned a lot of lessons along the way, built a lot of relationships along the way. And then, 9 years later, this is my second, I just hit my second year anniversary. So, but it's amazing to see your own growth when you listen to yourself, when you listen to your heart and where it's leading you. It's about passion. I mean, so much of the time it's about passion.
Well, congratulations. That's so awesome to hear. Like you said, stepping in 9 years ago that, who you couldn't have predicted. And I share with people that all the time. Like, if you'd have told me 6 years ago that I'd start my own video production business, I'd have said, you're crazy. The only thing I know how to do is cover sports, right? and once you get out of that box, if you will, of just sports, it's like, oh, there's a whole new world out here.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
You clearly are living that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fun. It reminds you of why you started doing certain things anyway. Even now, like I said, I still continue, even as the general manager, I'm very hands-on with the branding and the messaging of this building because that's important to me. It's important to me to see that how our news or how our radio or how our newspaper are covering us and what that message is that we're sending out.
Mm-hmm. That's great, Stephanie. What about, and you've already shared some challenges in your role right now, but if you can think back to 10 years ago or more, some of the challenges that you experienced, in TV, whether that was what it was like going after that first TV job. And you've already talked a little bit about, breaking through in San Antonio, but any challenges come to mind that you could pass along to someone and say, hey, do this to make sure that you avoid something like this, or something that you like you said before, that you learn from, that, you faced the challenge, you learned from it, you grew from it, and that you can just pass along to whoever sees this.
Yeah, I think, especially where news is concerned, I think the biggest challenges early on were, trying to find your place in whatever the news station was, right? So even just coming into that first job as a producer. So, as a young producer out of college, you're tasked as a producer. I don't think people really think about it this way, but you're given so much responsibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as a producer, you're putting this newscast together, top to bottom, and how it's going to then play out at 10 o'clock or 5 o'clock or morning news. And that's a lot of responsibility for one person to quote shoulder. and to try to make sure that it's all going to happen the way you have it in that nice little timeline in your computer. Because guess what? 98% of the time, it never happens that way,
Right.
and so learning to be flexible and thinking, on your feet. So, as a producer, you always have those challenges. But I think as a producer, one of my biggest challenges was understanding that things were not always going to go the way I had planned them, and I was going to have to adjust. You also have to remember that when you're adjusting or you're making a choice, there's always your responsibility to say the news director. I remember I had made a very strong decision at one point in a newscast to run an interview, and the news director and I didn't quite see eye to eye, right, on something. But after we really had a head-to-head discussion, that news director said to me, the fact that you can justify so clearly to me why you made that choice, I will allow you to move forward with how you put that show together. And I think that was a really big lesson for me, and one that I took throughout my career, was that I had to be able to truly justify why I made that choice, whether it was a certain interview or, showing certain images or, whatever that was. Because in news, you have such a large responsibility to the viewer, to, your audience. And so you have to think through every one of those things. I think I took that very personally. I wanted to make sure that I was being fair, that, that my stories were balanced, that I wasn't interjecting my own personal feelings into things. I think there's a lot of that in the media today. I mean, we'll just be honest, it's 2020 and everybody's sharing their thoughts, on news. And whereas I see that there's a place for that, I also see, especially in local news, especially in smaller markets where communities come to you to hear a very clear message. I need to know what's going on, but I don't need to know that you like it or don't like it or disagree or agree with it. I just need you to tell me the facts and the feelings of the people telling the story. And so, and you're going to find challenges along the way, again, with your news directors or your sales department. They're going to want you to tell something a certain way. You'll fight those battles, but you, at the end, always have to be true to yourself, I think, and be creative in the ways that you can make some of those things work, and listen to each other when you're doing those things, because that is a hard lesson, and that's a lesson that or a challenge that you're going to hit constantly in news.
Yeah.
Because you're always going to have somebody that's going to review your story, and they're going to go, well, I don't like that. And then you have to say, well, this is why I felt very strongly about that. Some of the other challenges, I think, that along the way, and this is more as you get into, say, maybe transitioning from an anchor or a reporter to an anchor, you're going to have challenges because you're a male or a female, or you're older or you're younger, or all of those things. And so, for those of you just jumping into the news business, just know that sometimes it's business. It is not about you. It is not, Stephanie's not good enough. It is just, we've decided that we're going to go with, a male. And that's what the news department wants to do, and some of those things, they're hard. It's hard to stomach when you feel like you've worked so hard and you've proven yourself, and, you're, you will at that point in time then just go, okay, where is this really what I wanted for, this reason, or did I just want to be an anchor? We find that a lot of times, being an anchor was always looked at as, kind of a more prestigious position, putting yourself in front of people. But I will tell you that being a reporter was probably more personally satisfying in the news business than even being an anchor sometimes, because you're delivering the news, but you didn't get to go out and meet those people and tell those stories. And, as a reporter, that was, I think, one of the best parts of the day, was meeting somebody new or learning something new every time.
Yeah, that's great stuff, Stephanie. So much advice, wisdom, if you will, the tips that you just sprinkle throughout that entire answer. I'm going to test you a little more though. Is there a piece of advice that you were given when you were first starting out? Anything that comes to mind? Because again, you just loaded that last response up with advice and tips and everything else.
I
But
just talk a lot.
is there anything that you can remember someone saying, hey, do this, or when you were in school, or maybe when you were already in the field? You know, you mentioned a mentor early on. I love the fact that you pointed that out and how important that is. But was there anything that does stand out even to this day, that somebody told me this, or they told me these things, and that you could pass along?
That's a hard one. I don't know if there's one specific thing even early on. I mean, I think I always was just the type of individual that kind of jump in with both feet. Let's see if it'll work, that kind of thing. Um, again, along the way, had lots of great just leaders and mentors and people that believed in me. I think we all, you have to have those people in our lives, and it is hard. Because I won't say I've been truly blessed by a lot of people that have believed in me sometimes before I believed in myself. But and I know that's not everyone's case. Sometimes we have to find that within ourselves. So I don't know that there's one thing that someone told me or shared with me specifically as a message. But I will say that early on, in news, I think one of the biggest key points that, like, say, a producer would lead me towards was, a time management thing. I had a news director that was really great about saying, make sure that you plan your time right. Right. And even though, that's not like a huge, like, philosophical thing, time management in news, when you have to go out and shoot a story, come back, put it together, and be ready to air, to go on to air to deliver that story. Time management became a really big thing that I felt like I perfected by the time I got done. Like, I could tell you how long it would take me to get somewhere. I had my time planned to shoot my story. I knew exactly how much time it was going to take me to put it together so that I could then be physically ready to then do the story. And although that seems like a really hard thing to do if you know your market well and you're planning things out, right? So, you get assigned a story and you're like, okay, where do I start? Sometimes you don't have a start, right? I mean, you know this. Some days there were days that were like, okay, I have this story and I don't have anything set up, right? And so the first part of your day is just literally making phone calls and trying to set things up, and so you've, eaten up most of your day there. And so that time management, when you hit that point, that's what I call go time. I get out the door, I'm going to go shoot, I'm going to come back. Having that time planned out, I think, was huge, because then you fall apart, and everybody sees you fall apart, that you struggle in the story writing, and you struggle in the editing. And if you're starting in a small market, you're going to be doing it all on your own. I mean, and even in larger markets now, I mean, I came from a time when, in larger markets, you had photographers and editors, and now everything is so scaled down that you do so much of it on your own. So, really learning how to manage your time effectively and listen. I think listening is probably one of the biggest lessons that you should learn, because as people in media, we're so used to being the talkers, right? We talk about everything. We're always talking. But when you're in the middle of an interview, listening is the biggest thing that you can do. I have always said, don't just have an outline of what you think your story is going to be and then try to force your interview into that story. It will not be a good story. At the end of the day, you won't be satisfied. It won't be a great story. If you know what your story is, and then as you start to listen and that story evolves and you change and adjust, that story is going to be a great story, because it's a real story. And I think so many times really young reporters are scared of doing that because, again, it's that time crunch. There's so much pressure. And so it's like, I want them to say this, this, and this. And then they're trying to lead that interview into those spots, and it doesn't work. It never works out that way. But if you're listening and you go, I have a broad idea of what I know this story is going to be, and now I'm going to ask you some questions, and then I'm going to just go with it a little bit. I think that's I think that was a big lesson for me along the way, was just don't talk so much.
No, that's
Let
great,
them
Stephanie.
talk to you.
Yeah, let them tell the story. I mean, in,
Yes.
in you're right. Like I was as guilty as anyone when I first started out. It's like, hey, I've got to get this right. I can't miss anything. And then it just dawned on me, and I can't remember who told me this, but it was like the best question that I could ask in an interview. And it was towards the end. I'd say, is there anything that I missed or anything that you wanted to talk about?
Anything
You
else you
know,
want to say?
yeah. And then all of a sudden, boom, you're going off to a whole nother direction. So
Yep.
I'm so glad you shared that, because that's a great point. Like if we go in with our agenda, we're going to miss the story, at least the heart of the story. So thank you for sharing that. That was great. All right, Stephanie, I want to respect your time, and I want to leave you with one last question. It's one of my favorites for people who have been in TV, and that is the most embarrassing or embarrassing moments of being on TV or in the TV industry. What comes to mind? Because I remember what it was like when those lights hit, and if something went wrong, I definitely have some bloopers.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you, as you've got some experience in this business, does anything come to mind that you can share with us?
Well, it's funny because I have said many times now, I am so glad that I was a reporter and anchor in a time where YouTube and all of this technology, Facebook and Snapchat, we're not really there to catch a lot of those moments. So a lot of them are just right here. Um,
Right.
yeah, I had those moments where, I'd be standing at a wall and I'd just done a story and they go to commercial break and I have my mic and they don't turn my mic off and I'm being silly and I'd go, does this make my butt look big? And then the phone would ring and they'll go, they heard you, that kind of thing. Or, um, you know, having to ride an elephant on live TV is never good. It's never good. Morning show live shot, they put you on top of the elephant and the elephant just starts to turn around. So now it's just your butt and the elephant's butt on TV, things like that, where you're just like, really, and you're trying to stay composed and you're just like, I don't know what is going on. There for a while, I think I was on the animal beat. I was in a rattlesnake pit and on an elephant and, all those great things. But yeah, there's a few of those out there. You always had to remember, always take a moment when they go to the next shot, don't say anything because your mic could still be hot. So that's definitely a key lesson. Watch
Yeah.
what you say right after. Yeah.
And we still see
usually I'm
that
just being
today.
silly.
So many people still fall victim to that. Like we know
Oh, I
that
know.
you're seconds away, and it happens so often still to this day.
Oh yeah,
So
or rolling your eyeballs. I see
yeah.
that. I've even seen that on national TV and I go, "Oh, they're still on you."
Yep.
Don't do that.
Yep. And
Don't do
anyone's
that.
been there, just like you said, you've been in their shoes before, whether you know that person or not, you feel for them
Yes,
because
you're
you're
like,
like,
"Oh, yeah." But
could have been me, or it
most of
was
my
me. I
bloop
did do that.
most of my bloopers, thankfully, were me just being silly or stupid,
Yeah.
not too many. I didn't have, luckily, knock on wood, I didn't have too many just huge on air, massive blunders. Um, I was really good at kind of pre-reading my scripts and kind of knowing what was happening. But it definitely, television definitely forces you to think on your feet, be that kind of a quick thinker. I will say, if you're going into television, no matter whether you're doing sports or weather or you're going to be a reporter, like the best thing you can do is just learn how to just talk on the fly. I mean, don't write things down and expect to read them.
Right.
And now there's so many portable teleprompters. You
Yeah.
can use an iPad, but I came from news in the days where you had to memorize everything because and so it wasn't really memorizing, it was just key points, and learning how to speak off the top of your head. And I still think that serves reporters very well, out in the field and being able to do live shots. Live shots were my favorite thing. I loved live shots. Still to this day, that's the one thing I miss.
Yeah.
I'll see some breaking news, something, and I'm like, oh gosh.
That
I
adrenaline rush, is that what it
Yeah.
was for you? That
I
excitement?
don't think that ever goes away. I don't think it does.
Yeah.
I don't think it does. But
Well, Stephanie, I thank you so much. Like I said, I want to respect your time and the fact that you made time for this during
Well,
your
thank
work
you
day.
for having me. It was fun. It was fun. And, and again, I just hope that, someone takes a little something away from it and puts it to practical use in their new life and their new career. So
Oh, for sure.
congratulations to those who are watching and just getting started. It is quite an adventure, I will tell you.
Yeah, and your story, like I said, there's no doubt if they listen to even a little bit of what you shared, every single answer was just exactly, it's what I was looking for. So much value.
Well, thank
And
you.
thank you for sharing with us today, Stephanie. It's great to see you.
Great to see you.
And thank you for checking out this channel. If you found this content beneficial, I'd appreciate it if you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and share it with someone you think might find it beneficial as well, because this channel was simply started and created to serve you, to help others grow, to learn how other successful TV journalists do or did it. So take what serves you so you can get better faster and reach your next level.